Hello everyone, my name is Seth Stroud, and this video presentation will be over the game of the century, which featured the number one UCLA Bruins at this time versus the number two Houston Cougars. This game was a little more important than what most people originally anticipate. This had not only a great impact on the game of college basketball, but also off the court as well. Um, there was a lot of controversy initially surrounding the game. It was very hard to schedule this game. UCLA was actually riding a 47 game win streak, which is very impressive. And if you really don't know how many games that truly is, that's almost accumulates up to 2.5 years in full seasons worth of not losing. And Houston was actually also undefeated, but just for this year. So this is why this game had so much of a hype surrounding it, and it definitely lived up to that, and so much more. And I can't wait to dive into the details of this game with y'all. So I just wanted to throw in a little slide about the attendance for this game. As you can see here, there was a announced attendance of 52,693 people at this game, which back in that time was one of the, if not the largest paid crowd to see any event ever. But also, what many don't realize that there was millions, and I mean millions, watching the game from their TV. And back in the day, this was very hard to do. For have all these people watching the game on TV. It was very rare to get that many people watching the game. So a lot of these players actually, it was reported, were so nervous before they took the floor that a lot of them had to change up their routine just to not get sick at their stomach. I know it's reported that a couple of players were seen trying to take ginger to try to loosen up their stomach a little bit just because there was so many people in attendance. So I just wanted to show y'all, I guess, really how big and prove to y'all how massive this game actually meant to not only the players of the universities, but to everyone involved. All right, so this is actually a picture of the Houston Cougars coach at the time of this game. His name is Guy Lewis, and Lewis was very prominent. He wasn't only just the coach that, well, I'll tell you about the results of the game later, but he wasn't just the coach that was coaching the Houston Cougars at the time. He meant so much more to this program than what people could only imagine. Lewis actually was the one who originally wanted to schedule the UCLA Bruins. UCLA had just beat them the year before in the national semifinals by 15. UCLA actually won 73-58. And Guy Lewis approached, at this time, his name was Ted Nance. He was, I guess, serving as a sports information director for the University of Houston at the time. There was a story that Guy Lewis approached him in the hallway and wanted to play UCLA, and at this time that was unheard of. That was almost written up as a loss before the game even started for most people. But Lewis knew the type of team he had and the type of player he had in Elvin Hayes, and he really wanted to prove that his team could compete on a national level. So him and Ted talked about it. They ended up approaching UCLA about that decision, and I'll tell you in the next slide kind of how John Wooden and UCLA responded to Guy and his request on playing them. All right, so hopefully everybody knows who this pitcher is. This is actually John Wooden. He was head coach of the UCLA Bruins at this time. Everyone knows about John Wooden's legacy on the court and how many national titles this man has won. But before the game of the century, Wooden and his Bruins had actually only won 3 national titles at this time. They won in the seasons of 1964, 1965, and the year 1967. And the reason I'm pointing those 3 out is because those are the 3 championships that were won before this game of the century occurred. And in the 1967 year, if you remember my past slides, this is where Houston and UCLA actually met up for the first time in the 1967 national semifinal, where Wooden actually got the best of Guy Lewis and the Houston Cougars and defeated them 73-58 at this time. So Wooden and Guy Lewis kind of already had a history before I guess you would say, the history started. And Wooden actually was not key on actually scheduling Houston for this 1968 game in the Astrodome. He actually got approached by J.D. Morgan, who at the time was the UCLA sports information director, and he actually had to talk Wooden into even allowing the game to happen. John Wooden wasn't for scheduling harder opponents. I guess out of his non-conference schedule, it was just a thing back in the day that many guys didn't want to do. He wanted wins. Definitely wasn't scared of anybody, but was just kind of skeptical about the entire idea to begin with. But J.D. Morgan and him had a good talk. They sat in his office. I think it was written in the article for about 2 hours talking about whether they should or shouldn't accept the contract that Houston proposed to them. But at the end of the day, they accepted, and Wooden vowed to have his boys for UCLA ready for that event. So this right here is Dick Enberg. And for many people that don't know who he was actually the one who provided and televised and commentated the game for the Bruins and the Cougars. And Dick was actually the UCLA Bruins commentator full time. He was just actually one of the best in the business, so they allowed him to call the game for everybody. And the reason that he is so special is because the game got viewed by so many people, and this really catapulted not only his career, but just college basketball in itself. Everyone knew Enberg's voice, and they knew how good he was, but he only called UCLA Bruins games before this, so he really never got that national spotlight that he probably deserved. But after this game, it catapulted him to being actually considered one of the best sports announcers of his generation and maybe of all time. He got stated that Enberg actually voiced his opinion throughout the course of the year, stating that many fans outside of Houston believed it would be just another game against UCLA. Enberg actually was on record saying how much that he thought UCLA would trample over Houston, but that, as many people will find out, turned out to be false. So before we get into the details of the actual game, I just wanted to show y'all a little picture of the two All-Americans from the game. That is actually Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the back for the UCLA Bruins, and that is Elvin Hayes for the Houston Cougars there in the front. Both of these two guys were All-Americans, and they were really the, I guess, featured people for this game. Many people really watched, not only because it was a 1 versus 2 matchup, but they really watched because of these two guys. Both these guys were in their primes at this time and probably the face of college basketball. So to be able to watch both of these athletes on the same court at the same time was a very special moment for many people. And a lot of people don't realize, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar actually came into the game with a scratched cornea and was not 100%. And many Bruins fans felt like that the result of this game was a result of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar not being 100%. And it's also stated that Elvin Hayes actually made a quote before the game that I find pretty cool. So the Houston Cougars were actually riding a 48-game home winning streak. Not a 48-game winning streak, just a 48-game home winning streak at this time. And it is said that Elvin Hayes says that they're going to make that 49 at the end of this game. So I thought that was pretty cool. And you'll find out that these two guys battled all night and just really showed why they were two of the best players in college basketball at this time. So this game was a back-and-forth event. They changed the leads the entire first and second half of the game. The Bruins actually went into halftime down by 3, and Elvin Hayes led all scorers at the half with 29 points. To come out of the second half, it was still a back-and-forth event, and UCLA actually came back and battled back to tie the game at 67 overall. But Houston eventually took that lead back and made that 69-67. There was a little under a minute to go, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar actually got fouled to go to the line to tie the game, and he went down and made both free throws to tie it at 69. And UCLA knew that Elvin Hayes was going to touch the ball there towards the end. So he actually got fouled with 30 seconds left and went to the line to try to put his Houston Cougars up by 2. And he was under 60% free throw shooter. So both of these free throws were not guaranteed. But Elvin went to the line and knocked down both of these 2 free throws to give the Cougars a 71-69 lead. And Houston actually knew that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was going to touch the ball on the next possession, but that was not the case. John Wooden had actually drew up a play for his jump shooter at the time. His name was Lynn Shackelford, and he wanted Lynn to get in the corner and to shoot the game-tying shot to send it to overtime. But the ball actually never reached Lynn's hands. It was dribbled off of the foot of the UCLA point guard, and never even got a shot off at this time. So Houston eventually won this game 71-69. It was a nail biter throughout, and many people wonder why Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wasn't going to touch it there at the end, but it was actually a great play designed by Wooden. If you watch it, it's just his point guard couldn't get the ball into the hands of the guy at the time, and this game went down in history as one of the best and most epic games, not only of the '60s but pretty much of all time.